this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Imagine you're in some third world hellhole that our government has sent you to. You're highly specialized. You can handle any situation. And your job in particular is to keep your teammates alive. And not just from the perspective of, say, planning an attack or setting up a defense. I'm talking about their day-to-day lives, treating them for stab wounds, gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, tropical diseases. Oh, and by the way, you've also gotten into the local villages and you're treating them as well. The people that have never been inoculated. Who I'm talking about right now are Green Beret medics. They are some of the most fascinating special operations people on the face of the planet because, believe it or not, the training that you have to go through to become a Green Beret medic equals that of a physician assistant, and probably a little bit more because of the environments that you go to. Today, we're going to talk about one of these guys that honorably served, that retired, and was working actually at a university to receive his physician assistant degree. But you know what? He'll never walk across the stage because he's a homicide victim now. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I got to tell you, I've for a long time, I thought that I wanted to go into medicine. I really did. I thought that that's what I wanted to do. Then I discovered I have no bedside manner, and it probably would be better with the dead, more than likely. And I'm not good. I'm good with people I love, but I don't know about total strangers. And so I chose maybe the path less trod. I don't know. But for me, being around the dead was much more comfortable than being in an exam room or certainly out in the field treating somebody. I think I've done much better. But there are people out there that have a gift for it. They have a gift of healing, I think. And I'm not talking about some kind of spiritual gift here. I'm talking about the ability to utilize the tools that science provides and to guide their hands and their mind in order to make people better. And boy, I tell you what, Green Berets that pursue this particular job set are they're, as far as I'm concerned, they're the best of the best because it's very rigorous what they have to go through.
Whenever I think of Green Beret doctor in particular, but Green Berets in general, you think that's a man's man. You know, you think of the Ballad of the Green Berets and the history of the Green Beret. I think of Jeffrey McDonald, the one big failure of a Green Beret, but he really was a fake one at that, even though he was a doctor. But in this particular case, we're dealing with a man who, Clint Bonnell, who served 2 tours of duty in Iraq, which I cannot imagine what that had to have been like for somebody working in the medical field, like that. I really can't, Joe. It goes beyond what I can even imagine. I mean, we see movies and things and you see what's going on and we hear about these things, but I really cannot put myself into that person, you know, and imagine what it's like to wake up knowing today could be your last day. All the while you're trying to save lives and you could die in the process. This is a heroic job that you live with 24/7. And
you know, the 2 tours that you mentioned, that's the tours that we know about.
No, because I was going to ask you about that.
They can be deployed all over the world. Well, and a lot of it depends on which special forces group they're in. And so there are various groups, and each group, and some folks might not know this. I've got friends that are in special operations. I've got former students that are special operators.
See, this is the difference between you and me. You've got friends in special. I've got friends in low places. You got friends in special forces. You know.
Well, some of them are in low places too, and have been in low places. But you know, I've always been enamored of them. I'm I was just an old dog-faced soldier. I never did anything special, but to see what they go through and that these guys are so highly specialized, not only would he have had to go through all of this training, which is extensive. By the way, did you know that the Green Berets and those that are in the training, and I actually met a couple at one point in time, they were at Grady Hospital in Atlanta, and they had been sent there to work in the emergency room. And that was part of their training. And they would go to big cities where there was trauma, a lot of trauma, particularly gunshot, firearms-related trauma, that they could get hands-on training with when the individuals roll through the door. Because, I mean, let's face it, some of our cities are like war zones. And
Wow.
that's about as close as you're ever going to – you can't replicate that in the field. You know, you might could go out and if you've got a carcass of an animal, you might could shoot it and – try to repair a dead animal's injury, but the dead animal isn't writhing around and trying to fight you every step of the way, and you're not having to talk with them. It requires no bedside manner. Yeah. So they would actually go into these environments to prepare to go into what are referred to as austere environments where they can operate, and they can operate. Dave, the thing about it is these guys. And when I say operates interchangeable with operations as well. They operate as special forces soldiers because they can kill you as well as heal you. But in addition to that, they can actually do minor surgeries in the field or get you stabilized until they can get a helo to get you back to a base camp where there is an area, a medical unit, so that they can do extensive surgery. And there's all kinds of stories going all the way back to Vietnam about the heroics of special forces medics. Their training is unbelievable and it's intense. And the thing about it is you work untethered. Imagine that. You have no support system behind you. It's not like, you can run down the street and go to the supply room and get some more bandages or something. What you got is what you got. And if you've only got a pack with you out in the field and you're going to have to maybe extract a bullet, a projectile, sew somebody up, hang an IV, you have to bring all of that with you. And you have to be prepared to administer all that stuff and maybe do it in a mud hole while you're doing it. Can you imagine that?
That's why it just boggles my mind, for real. But, we do have people like that in our world that just they have a different skill set, emotionally, psychologically, physically. And Clint Bonnell was that person. So he does all this in his military career. He's 50 years old. He retires. Okay. His day of retirement was the last day of last year, December 31st, 2024. He retires from the military and begins his new life. And it's amazing to me that a man with his background could serve, as you mentioned, 2 tours in Iraq that we know about, no telling what else he has seen and done. But he comes home and less than 2 months after his retirement, less than a month after his retirement, he goes missing. 29 days after his retirement, the man is missing, Joe. Actually, it'd be 28 days. January 28th, he goes missing. And he was such an on-time cat. He was one of these guys that, you really could set your watch by. You knew if he's not here, something's wrong.
There's a problem. Yeah.
So like many of our stories, this one starts with a well-being check, January 28th, 2025. He doesn't show up for his physician assistant class. So an employee at Methodist University calls Cumberland County Sheriff's Office and says, hey, go and check on this guy. He never misses. He's always here. Something is wrong. We can't get him. So they do. They go by to check, talk to his wife. Shana Cloud says, hadn't seen him since last night. Don't know where he is. Don't know what time out. And his car's there. His stuff is there, but he's not there. Now, Joe, you and I have done a number of stories that begin with a well-being check.
Yeah.
And usually you get that one call and they go out and they check and walk away going, well, it's an adult. He has a right to do whatever he wants. We don't know where he is. How much more can you really do? But oddly enough, in a really strange turn of events, Sheriff's Department gets a second call on the same day, hours after the first one. It's another person, a friend this time, a close friend calls them and asks for a well-being check because he's not answering text messages, and he always does. So that actually sends their little antenna up a little bit further. We got to check on something here. So 2 well-being checks hours apart on the same day. And lo and behold, they find out that his wife, Shana Cloud, has not been the one to file a missing person report. You know, I don't know the rules on this, Joe. If I go missing, how long, or if you can't get up with me, how long before you can report me missing? Do they make you wait, 48 hours? There is a timetable. You can't just say, Dave's 15 minutes late, he's missing, and you're an adult. You have the right to do what you want. I think there is usually 24 to 48 hours unless they find blood, right?
Yeah, 24. I've heard 72 as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, 72 hours, 3 days.
Yeah.
Our continuum extends out further and further. We were just talking about this young girl that with Nancy that has gone missing, and they thought that maybe she had been spirited away to Moldova. Again, this is another case out of North Carolina, by the way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And we were talking about this very thing yesterday with Nancy on her show about the further out in time that you extend down that timeline, it's a diminishment of everything involved. First, the physical location where the individual is, any evidence that's left behind, anybody that may have seen something that just they've now gone on about their lives. So you're losing little bits and pieces. I tell you what's more compelling to me than anything about this is that the domestic situation where you've got a wife who shows up, who the popos show up at their house, where is he? And it's like,
I don't know.
I have no idea. He, his belongings are here. His car is here. I don't know where he is. And I guess that there are people that live their lives that way, and good luck and Godspeed. But
I don't know anybody like that, Joe. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, before I started this, I just got off the phone with Kimmy. I mean, right. I know exactly where she is, what she's doing, and she knows what I'm doing. And the next question is, when are you coming home?
Right.
And so, and I'm not trying to.
When you live with somebody, that is what it's like, Joe.
It is what it's
consideration.
Like. We're not like roommates in college, where, I don't know where my roommate is. I have no idea. I got 4 other roommates in here and I have no idea where they are. I think they were going home this weekend. It's not like that. You're married. Where's your husband? What's going on? And look, I got to tell you this. There's an old adage in the military, and here's how it goes. And I've tried to teach this to my son since he was little. It goes like this. To be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late, and to be late is unforgivable. In our case today, he never showed up. The question is, who exactly are we not forgiving for this? Well, Dave, I think that the old saying, birds of a feather flock together, when we begin to think about Clint Bonnell, who, by the way, is retired Army Green Beret medical sergeant. He's married to Shana Cloud, and she's a former traveling nurse, which in and of itself, I've got family members that have done traveling nursing, which is fascinating because you talk about, leaving everything behind and kind of heading out to do your thing in different locations. And it's kind of interesting that she now, I think, works for the Virginia Department of Corrections now. And she's formerly a traveling nurse. And of course, corrections, departments have nurses, obviously. But people say, well, how could she be a traveling nurse and be married? Well, here's the thing about it. If you work in special operations, it's not like you're in like a gigantic division, like the 82nd Airborne or the 101st or the 25th Infantry Division, where you know that that big unit is moving, and they do weeks and weeks of spinning up and preparing papers and all that stuff before people ship out. If you're in special operations, you can be gone like that, and you could be gone for a protracted period of time. And here's another thing. You're not always going to be able to tell your family members where you're going. Okay. It's called OPSEC. It's Operation Security. And so you might not know, but that would actually fit well if they're married and she had been a traveling nurse, because if he's not at home, why does she need to be at home? She could be out making really good money. She's a military dependent, so her bennies are all covered, got that TRICARE working. And so she's out being a traveling nurse, and now they've settled apparently in this location, and he's in retirement. I'm fascinated by this relative to the life that they had lived, and to the point where he's retired now. You talk about throwing the anchor out and changing lifestyles all of a sudden. It's a mind-blowing adjustment, Dave.
It is, and I think that's what, as the deputies are doing the first well-being check, and they talk afterwards, of what they saw, the demeanor of the person they greeted, and in this case, it's his wife. They're already starting to piece things together, and when they go back to headquarters, no matter what we think, what we saw, there is a man who now is missing. A man that was very dependable. He's missing, and his wife says she doesn't know where he is and doesn't seem to be too concerned about it. So when a missing persons report is filed, it was not done by his wife. That's becoming more common in the stories we cover. But they served their first search warrant on January 31st. I say they, being the sheriff's department. But I want to point this out because on the 28th, we don't know where he is. And this is where I went back to that 24, 48 hours. How long do they have to wait? You mentioned the story of Madalena Kojikari in North Carolina, where she was not reported missing for 3 weeks. And this is a child we're talking about there. The parents didn't report her missing. And they in North Carolina have a thing called Kaylee's Law, based on Kaylee Anthony, where a parent only has 24 hours to report a child missing, which, Joe, I don't know any person that would not report their child missing immediately, but there are, in cases that we've covered where they don't do that. But the same is true here. You've got a man that's missing and people are concerned because it's not like his current situation. He's not currently active in the Green Beret. He's not currently active in the military, going overseas and fighting. He's not doing any of that. He's now into a very subtle life, and he's got classes to go to, and he didn't show up. He is missing. So they filed the missing person report 3 days after the well-being check, and they served the first of 2 search warrants at the house. Based on what I know now, I pretty much think I know what they found during the first search warrant, at least the second one, when they went into the house. So investigators start piecing this together, and they go and travel up to Virginia. That's where Shana Cloud, when she was working as a traveling nurse, with the prison system, she traveled through Virginia. They had property up in Virginia. Got a lake cabin, I believe, and some other things. And so deputies actually working with people up in Virginia, the Virginia State Police, they meet with them up there, and they search one of Shana Cloud's vehicles, rental properties, cell phones. They're starting to put a few things together. They serve a few more search warrants over the next couple of days. And during the entire month of February, now remember, dateline, December 31st, 2024, Clint Bonnell retires from the military. January 28th, he goes missing. We're into February. I think the shocking part for me, the man had 1 month out of the military and goes missing. That just is beyond.
It's absolutely nuts. And I can tell you, dude, he would have been celebratory. This is a benchmark moment that people wait for. They wait for that day and to do their 20 where they're going to be vested. And then they look back and they say, I've done my time. I've served my country and I'm up and out. And so the fact that he had gotten into this physician assistant program at Methodist University, which by the way is quite a good one. He was not just going to sit at home and twiddle his thumbs and, lay back on his laurels. He was going to get, he's 50, he's still got a lot of work life left. And can you imagine all of that? He would be a very desirable commodity. Once you get the degree and you pass your boards, it's something to be able to say, well, we've got a PA that works in the emergency room. Maybe that's what he wants to do. And he works 3 nights a week. He's going to go in there and work. And there's not really that much that's probably going to shock him. Or, he might work. I don't know. He might want to be a pediatric PA. He might want to work with little kids because, these guys, when they're out in the field, they're going into villages and they're treating people that wouldn't otherwise get medical help. Our guys did that for years and years, both in Iraq and even more so, I think, in Afghanistan, where these people are so isolated. And he's somebody, here's the thing about it, Dave, this is not a normal 50-year-old. This is a guy who's well prepared to take care of himself. I mean, it's like, I wouldn't want to cross paths with him.
Actually, that's what I was thinking
too,
Joe.
Harm.
Yeah. This is a man's man, and he's, again, just retired. He's only 50, and it's a different world now. So when he gets missing and they start investigating, they know they're not going to have a happy ending. He's not shacked up in a hotel smoking crack. That's not him. So they being the investigators, they're already searching multiple states. They're pulling all the data they can find on any digital thing that gets online. They've got records of it now. And it goes back to old school stuff because on February 25th, less than a month into the investigation, a property owner checking some land, wooded area, about 3 miles from where Clint Bonnell lives, finds what appears to be human remains in a pond. So he is our finder, Joe. Our finder does not find a body. He calls in, says, I found something. It probably is a body. Now, I talked to you about this before we started because I would think if you find a body, you call it, I found a body. But this part is human remains. Am I right in assuming when they say we found human remains that it's not a complete body?
I think that's a good way to put it because it can be obviously, let's just say, particulated. So you might have evidence of human remains that, you might just be standing there on a muddy bank of some pond down in the south, holding a foot in your hand that's detached from the rest of the body. Well, that's an element of human remains. It's not a body. So you're right to draw that distinction, and it's kind of a catch-all phrase, I think. Now, you can say human remains, and I think most people are, outside of you and I, most people are not going to think dismembered. They're going to think a wholly intact body. But the world that you and I inhabit, though, Dave, it seems as though with greater frequency, and we even did an entire presentation on this, both on the body bags as well as at CrimeCon, on just the instances that we're seeing where people seem to be, the veil has been rent in two, where they've crossed let me see, what other analogy? They've crossed the Rubicon when it comes to
right.
what they'll do to a human body. People are not as averse, apparently, as they once were to ripping a body to shreds with whatever is at their disposal. But going back, to this gentleman, I'm still troubled over the fact that his car is still in the driveway and that there's no evidence that he's left. And, look, I guess, back in his practitioner days as a Green Beret, it would be nothing for him to, ruck, 10 miles to walk into an area. Some guys continue to ruck, believe it or not. There's a couple of them that live around here. I think that they're both attached to the ROTC department. I see them rucking up and down the road all the time with these big, heavy packs, just trying to stay in shape. But why are you trying to stay in shape if you're 50 and you're retired now? it doesn't make sense that he has exited the home and everything that he would need, I would think, to really get by in the civilian world is left behind. And he has filed no notice with the people at Methodist University, something that and I'm superimposing my thoughts here, so forgive me, indulge me, something he's worked so hard for. I mean, because that truly, Dave, would be a culmination. You spent all of his time paying your dues in the military, bearing witness to some of the most horrible things that anybody could bear witness to. And now the big payoff comes when you're accepted into a program to work on a master's degree in medicine that will put you in a position to sit for the boards for a PA and work anywhere you want, and you don't have bullets flying over your head. Okay, so let me back up here and think about this just for a moment. I've got a guy who has apparently vaporized, nowhere to be found. You got cops looking for him. His keys, his car, his phone is still at the house. And then, tell me right, am I saying this right, Dave? Within 3 miles of his home, a dismembered body is found in a pond by some guy that's out checking property. Did I get that right?
Yep. Human remains, and again, we're going back to back to basics here. Human remains found in a pond, and it's on private property, but it is about 3 miles from where Clint Bonnell lives. But when I was looking at this, Joe, over the evidence and over the search warrants and, going to Virginia and North Carolina and all the places they were searching, I was looking at the search warrant in his house of what they found there. But in all of that, they couldn't find where he was. And when the remains are found, they didn't immediately identify as, hey, we've got this missing Green Beret we've been looking for, which everybody there's got to know, right? And now you've got a guy calling in saying, he doesn't say, hey, I think I found the Green Beret. I got something here that looks like human remains. What are you going to find, Joe, in a pond that could be from the day the man went missing? I'm going to assume that he wasn't tied up in a cave and tortured and held here in the USA until he finally gave up whatever secrets they thought he was holding, and then they drowned him and pulled him apart. I'm not going to assume that. I'm going to assume that he was killed, and then his remains were then tossed into a pond, probably weighted down with something. But I'm wondering what you would really be finding, Joe. What kind of pieces and parts? And are we going to deal with animals pulling him apart and taking, what are we really going to find? What's it going to look like when I have human remains in a pond that could have been there for 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, when they're particulated like this, and listen, this is happening in Cumberland County, North Carolina, which is right adjacent to Fayetteville. And of course, Fayetteville is right adjacent to where Special Forces is. Okay. And that's where they train. And other elements, obviously, of the Army are there as well at Fort Bragg. And so they didn't move too far away from where his unit would have been based out of, perhaps, where he retired. And lots of times, guys, when they're getting out of the military, they have to return back to the location that they entered the military in, and they will actually retire them at that location. It doesn't happen every time, but it does sometimes. Well, he's there, and now you have him in this pond that's 3 miles away. If it is, in fact, him, you do know that you have a body, and so they have an uphill climb relative to trying to get these remains identified. And if the body has been, let's just say, particulated, dismembered, we're talking about probably a pond that's in the middle of a pasture somewhere in the South. The bottom of that pond is going to be red clay mud, probably. And not necessarily all elements of the body are going to be floating. You might not necessarily see them, out there, because some of them will be on the bottom and they could be buried in the mud. Do you know what it takes in order to extract that body from that environment? Well, if you have the ability and the thing has a dam, which I guess it would be, you try to drain off the dam. Try to drain it off, because you find one piece of the body, you don't know how many sections the body has been placed into. So I've actually participated in events where ponds have been drained. Some places you can't drain. You're down in the intercoastal waterway or something like that, down in South Louisiana and Florida or whatnot. You're not going to drain that. You're essentially combing along the bottom with your hands, looking for things and hoping there's not going to be a gator in there or something else that's going to hurt you. I can't imagine anybody wanting to go into the water with an alligator nearby them, but there commonly should not be those kind of predators in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There might be some nearer the coast, but what I'm saying is that the body would be in an advanced state of decomposition already in the muck and the mire of this little pond, and somebody's going to have to go out there and feel along the bottom of this thing, unless they drain the thing all the way out, hoping that you'll be able to get to every single element. Because here's the problem, Dave. If you have a body that has been dismembered, it's been broken down into a variety of elements. Could be, you could have the arm, for instance. It's cut away at the shoulder. It's also cut away at the elbow, and the hand is removed at the wrist. So that's 3 elements just by itself with the arm, okay? If somebody takes their time. And how'd they treat the torso? Well, they removed the head from the torso. Did they split the torso into multiple pieces? Because, the bowels get really messy when you go to try to dispose of them. If you saw a body in half, be prepared for a huge mess. How did they quarter the body up? So for every bit of the body, you don't know what happened. So the assumption is it's broken into the smallest parts possible. Well, Dave, from an evidentiary standpoint, the smallest part possible can hold the key to this, because you don't know what anatomical element is going to give you an idea as to what brought about the cause of death in a case like this. So it's painstaking, to say the least. And then on top of that, you've got advanced decomposition, and person's probably not going to have a wallet in their back pocket. You might, if you can find a hand, you might could do prints, but that's holding out hope that the finger pads are not degraded to the point where they're just a mushy mess. And you're going to have to take them, draw them out, inject tissue builder into the pads of the fingers, and have that build up over time, and then roll a print. That is, even if you can find the hands. It's a heck of a mess for anybody, for an investigative team to be in. And boy, they were right in the middle of it here.
So ultimately, you mentioned you got a mess. And I have to wonder, what did they find, investigators, inside the home that they could tie into with the remains of the body? Because when you find remains like this, Joe, and do you show up on the scene and get a net? I mean, you pull out the biggest parts, I'm guessing, but there's going to be smaller parts. I mean, the body's going to start falling apart at some point, right? And you've got to get everything out of this pond that you can find. Yeah. Do you really get a net and go skimming like I do in my pool? And I'm not trying to be gross. I'm just curious.
No. I've literally stripped down to my skivvies and walked out into a pond to recover bodies. I'm literally right there in the water with the body, and taking the elements out one by one. I remember, and this was really dangerous and stupid on my part, I had a guy that had been diagnosed with AIDS, and he walked out into a pond in Atlanta on a golf course. Matter of fact, it was Bobby Jones golf course, which is, Bobby Jones, famous golfer. This course is named after him. I think it was Bobby Jones golf course. And he shot himself in the head. Well, he was found floating out there by the workers. Well, it fell to me to go get him. And he had threatened to take his life. And I went out there, Dave, and I remember, first off, it's on a golf course. So I'm barefoot down to my skivvies. I'm walking out there, and I'm walking atop of golf balls. There's golf balls all in the water, and I finally make my way out to him to bring him in. And I'm thinking, he's got a gunshot wound in the head. I'm looking at him. Here we are, it looks like some after death baptism out there in the middle of this thing. Here I am with a body. He's floating out there. I've got gloves on. I don't know why I'm wearing gloves. And I'm manipulating the body. I look at his head, and he's got a gunshot wound. And I'm thinking, I can't exit this pond with this body without recovering the weapon. Because I knew that if I moved the body, that I would lose sight or location of the weapon. So guess what I did? I was barefooted, and I started feeling along the bottom of the pond with my toes. And I remember I grasped the barrel between my big toe and the second toe and drew it upwards and was able to grab the pistol handle and take it out. It was a 38 caliber revolver that had, just sunk to the bottom adjacent to the body. So the thing about it is, when you're working cases like this, you have to do what you have to do. And there's been other cases where I've had bodies that have been dismembered and thrown off of bridges, and have had to go into the water, didn't search with my feet. And this is before the popularity of dive teams, really, too. And some things were just lost. Now we have dive teams. They'll go out and they'll find a lot of stuff. But I don't know if they utilized a dive team in this case, or if you just had investigators or team members that went out there and collected the remains. Because, they always make a big deal out of us having to create a command center at one of these scenes when you have something like that. And what it is an area where they can bring in a vehicle, and they kind of have this radio set up and everything else, and you're commanding the area. You're setting up what everybody's job is going to do. There ain't too much to command here. It's like, all right, guys, we got to get in the water and get this body out of here. And we have to do it the most efficient way we can. And we also have to document along the way, because this is a crime scene, Dave. That's the other thing about this. You're taking a body and you're dismembering it, perhaps, and you're tossing it out into the pond. Well, each element of the body and anything else associated with that body or the crime is a piece of evidence. It's just that a lot of it is underwater now. How are you going to handle that? And assuming that this was in the middle of a pasture, it's going to be muddy. You and I have grown up and seen these ponds that you can drive past on the road through any of these, country hamlets, and you can't see your hand in front of your face if you're in the water in these things.
No.
So it's a very difficult and, again, austere environment to have to work in, Dave.
All right. So now you've got the body or remains. You have human remains. You get them out. Now, they had served search warrants at the house, and they had done a digital forensic look at phones, cameras, things like that, and they were able to determine a number of different things from the digital timeline that was built using the cell phone data, and they were reframing all of that in as they were waiting on the DNA results to come back from the human body. The human remains that they found. So in that regard of finding the DNA, how long would it take from the time you find the remains until you can get DNA results back?
I'm gonna say something here that's a big clue to the outcome of this. And it's not like the DNA was sent out to our friends at Othram. Okay. The DNA here, Dave, this gives you an idea where their mind is, where the mind of the investigators are. They sent this DNA sample to the Armed Forces Medical Examiner's office. Well, why in the world would they do this? Because you got an unknown body. They had a level of suspicion here, and it's still unclear what that clue was. Maybe it was a tattoo. Maybe the face was still recognizable. They might have had an image that they could have said, yep, kind of looks like him. we know the quickest way to do this. We're going to reach out to our partners with feds and, talk to the folks at Armed Forces Medical Examiner's Office, because, every trooper that deploys now, they do a DNA swab on these individuals. So you're talking about a buccal mucosal swab that they would have on file there. So you collect DNA from the remains that you have, from where it is that they collected those remains, and you set up a profile on that, and you have the Armed Forces Medical Examiner's Office compare it. And Dave, I'll be doggone if they didn't get a hit, brother.
And it was very quick, about 4 weeks between the time you had the, from a timeline standpoint, January 28th, he doesn't show up for class. They search. Wife says, I don't know where he is. They find on February 25th, the human remains in the pond. March 28th, remains identified as the missing Green Beret. Now, there were some things found inside the home that the police did not let that out for the public until all of this came about. When they got the positive hit, again, golly gee whiz beef, we have a Green Beret missing, and we've got human remains 3 miles from his house, and we know what we're looking at. So go ahead and break it down as to what they found inside that house, Joe. And by the way, I will tell you that the other evidence that came about was digital with regard to putting Shana Cloud right there at the pond, Joe. Right there at about the time they expected those human remains got in that pond. They've got, a map. They have a digital fingerprint now of where you were. And lo and behold, Shana, you didn't know where your husband was January 28th, but we got you over here where his body was found.
Yeah, you couple that data with what they found inside that house, and just think about this. And remember how I had alluded a few seconds ago to they had some indicator that this might be him. Well, Dave, when they served those warrants, and I don't know, this is really rich, I got to tell you. When they served those warrants, they went into the house, and this former Green Beret, Bonnell, his laptop and his book bag that, he uses on his journey to become a PA, Dave, they got bullet holes in them. Now, how do you explain that? Well, because I've thought about, you would like to think that somebody that worked in special operations has got eyes in the back of their head. Okay. And yeah, I guess they do. But if you're not in theater any longer and you're not working at that pace that they work at, I'm sure that he was on alert. He had a situational awareness all the time that far exceeds anything that you and I would have. He would notice little things but still, in order to, use a term that they would use in an old Western movie, to get the drop on this guy, when would he be the most defenseless? Well, let's say he's getting ready to go to school. Got my book bag on, Mom. And all of a sudden, it's perforated by gunshots. Did she shoot him from the rear? Was he holding his laptop as he was shot, or was he shot on the other side of his laptop and he tried to get cover with his book bag? They haven't answered that question yet. We do know that the body that they recovered actually had multiple gunshot wounds to the body. But here's the thing, Dave. Okay, now you've killed your former Green Beret husband, allegedly. What you going to do now? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go get the skill saw, or get, the carpenter saw, or the maul, or, whatever it is, the axe, whatever I'm going to use. And I'm going to, break up my husband's body. Well, where are you going to do that without leaving a mess? My suspicion is that they're going to, if they haven't already, they're going to tear this place from stem to stern. And there's going to be a lot of Blue Star agent that's used in this house to, try to find any evidence of blood, because there's going to be a copious amount of blood, and not just from the gunshot wounds, but from the dismemberment as well. So you'll have these depositions that are lying about that maybe she went to some effort to clean. Here's another thing, too, that I was kind of fascinated by. They have, in fact, charged her, Ms. Cloud. They have charged her in this case. Dave, if she's a nurse, she's not necessarily going to have the same aversion to blood and those sorts of things that maybe an everyday civilian might. What do you think about that?
I actually made a note to ask you about this, because when I saw the charges against Shana Cloud, first-degree murder, kind of expected that, but she was also charged with concealment of death in the slaying of Clint Bonnell. And the concealment charge is because she failed to notify law enforcement of his death while knowing or having reason to know his death was not due to natural causes.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful. And again, that gives her, I don't know if that would qualify as, there's that old term that they use, the legalese, malice aforethought. Like you have totally an awareness of something. Mm-hmm. And so they know enough about her and the activities and everything that we don't have full knowledge of right now to charge her with this, that she had an awareness. What they're saying is, well, first off, they charged her with first degree. And first degree is generally in most states is capital homicide. So that's at the top end. Many times there's an element of certainly malice, but there's also an element of planning that goes into this. She's attempting or has attempted to conceal in the wake of this, and they know that she has knowledge that this has occurred. So, given that,
premeditation, premeditation can be formed in the blink of an eye.
I think Nancy says twinkling, doesn't she? She's more biblical with it. She's more King James with it. So in a twinkling of an eye. And so, with that said, you've got this former traveling nurse, they keep referring to her as former traveling nurse, that has allegedly executed her husband and taken him apart piece by piece. I think one of my thoughts was I was on air with a show the other day, and they were talking about, I was listening to them talk about, I think I was on Court TV, listening to them talk about this case before I came on to do my segment. And one of the attorneys says, well, I don't see how in the world a woman could pull this off. And I'm thinking, have you lost your mind? Of course a woman could pull this off. You sneak up on him, you have a handgun, what was it? Colt makes everybody
bullets in
equal.
the book bag and the laptop. I mean, yeah, of course.
You
a child could have pulled it off.
Yeah, you shoot him and then you particulate the body. Makes the body a lot more manageable. And oh, by the way, I've been driving past this place for a number of years now. I've seen it. Wouldn't that be a great spot to dump a body? Well, it's certainly not Arlington, which this fellow, because of his service to our country, may have deserved to have been in. But instead, the person that at least at one time in his life that he loved the most has now been charged with his homicide. We'll see how this turns out. There's going to be more to come, I can tell you this. And I'd like to know what her motivation was for it. Was it anger? Jealousy? Did it have something to do with money? Or was it that they were living separate lives? We'll find out, and I'll let you know more. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.